I think sometimes policy needs to follow, right? Because we can't pause with our work and wait for
And
them
what?
to do policy. The deployment of venture capital wasn't balanced, right? A lot of the money was going to West and East Africa. Some of the data providers, they ended up only with releasing a paper and making a big announcement, but their product never really, got to the market.
Hello, and welcome back to the Vambo AI in Africa podcast. I am Chido, co founder and CEO of Vambo AI. And today I'm speaking to an amazing guest, Phiwa, who's going to share with us about his journey building innovative technology solutions. Before we begin the discussion, please make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel as well as to like this video. I will share his details in the comment section afterwards, but for now, enjoy the discussion. Phiwa, how are you today?
I'm all right, Chido. How are you? And thank you for having me.
I am good. I am good. I'm so excited to speak to you. I know a lot about your work offline, and I'm excited for our viewers today to learn more about it. So, Piwa, tell us a little bit more about, again, who you are and kind of your journey towards starting to build solutions in tech.
All right, okay. My name is Phiwa Nkambule. Born in the Kingdom of Eswatini in 1992. Spent the first childhood years of my life there. And it's where I fell in love with technology. I was a geeky child. At the age of 14, I was running like a computer repairs consultancy, helping people with their software support with Microsoft Word or Microsoft Office. And I used to help my uncle who ran a photography and videography company set up CPUs. So I had a passion for IT as a child. And then at the end of my 14 years, I requested my dad to allow me to depart to my maternal heritage site, and then I relocated to South Africa to complete my high school, and then went to the University of Pretoria, where I enrolled for quantity surveying, but construction wasn't my thing. I moved to become law, and but I already knew that I had a passion for IT.
Yeah.
I had a passion for software, but I couldn't study that because where I come from, IT people at the time were just tech support people. The creative side wasn't known, especially in the early 2010s and 2000s. The creative side in Africa wasn't known. So it was difficult for me to persuade my parents to allow me to study IT or computer science. So I had to study things that made sense. But I continued to teach myself how to code and how to build apps. And around 2013, the term for IR wasn't there yet. But technologies like Internet of Things, data analytics or big data where it started becoming a thing.
Yeah.
And I realized that, something was coming. I've always been inspired by the different industrial revolutions. So the computer revolution, when Apple and Microsoft came about, used to inspire me a lot. So I felt post the social media wave of 2004, 2005, when Facebooks and Twitters came about, there was a new wave that was coming. And then, I got in. I founded my first startup in 2014, focused on data integration, data analytics, cyber, and then on top of that, we then built like different applications and fuel delivery, social media, and then I found my way in fintech. Still leveraging that kind of technology, data analytics, try and make insurance cheaper, to make banking more accessible. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's my life story. Summarized, or the my story from childhood to the point where I become a
Totally.
founder or an innovator.
There's so many things that you mentioned that I want to touch on because
Yeah.
fintech is probably going to be the majority of discussion today.
Yeah.
I first want to touch on what you mentioned that, you studied quantity surveying, didn't really feel it, went to become law, but you always knew you had something for tech.
Yeah.
How can someone who is in that space handle that right now? Like, you know what you want to do, perhaps you don't have the resources or the ability to do it. How can a young person in today's world with the resources that are available manage some of those conflicting, requests on them?
Yeah. I think the times. Okay, let me just start with the fact that the times are quite different now. So you can more or less study anything, but still become great in tech. And with growth, I've gotten to understand that if you are a domain specific expert, then adding technology on top of that just makes things a lot easier for
That's
you
true.
to innovate in that space. While tools are very, building softwares now, there's a lot of AI tools. And doing any other job, there's co-pilots, right? We're in the AI era. So you'd be able to do anything without much institutional academic knowledge. But if you do not have a choice, self-learning is a thing. You won't have an actual certificate for it, but with time, the amount of work and portfolio evidence that you've built,
Yeah.
then covers for that. So it's about reaching out to people that know, and using the internet. Right, there's YouTube,
Yeah.
there's blogs, just learning every day.
Yeah.
So I think, the times are much better now.
No,
Things,
that's true.
yeah,
And I'm also seeing, because at the moment, part of our team is non-technical and we're building
yeah,
quite a technical product.
yeah,
So we decided that this year is the year of learning. Everyone needs to be upskilling in something.
yeah,
And I've been finding so many amazing courses for literally like a beginner to
yeah,
start getting into, whether it's Python or whether it's machine learning or
yeah,
any specific niche. So you're right, the times definitely have changed. And I think there's a lot more that has gone into it taking that, adult learning and upskilling space.
yeah,
Then the second thing you mentioned that I want to touch on is this notion of waves of development, right? Especially in
yeah,
tech. So, you know, um, everyone kind of knows about like the internet wave in the 90s, and that
yeah,
was mostly happening in the US.
yes, yeah,
And it filtered towards some of our countries much later, and even till this day some of our countries are still catching up with some of the advancements that were made with that.
yeah,
And then now you're mentioning that you could sense that a new wave was going to come about.
yeah.
What were some of those signs that you were seeing? And I guess with where you're at in that point in time, what could you have done then to prepare yourself for the wave?
All right, okay. I'm a curious mind. I have a very curious brain, so I'm always reading. I watch lots of documentaries. So for me, that information, came easy because even when I was like in a low class, I was still curious about what's happening in technology. I was learning how to code.
Learning, yeah.
So it came easy. But I think for a layman, right, who isn't, beyond, actually, there isn't any other way of knowing because it's not a spiritual, it's not a prophecy. So the best way to know is to just follow the right publications, read, watch the right content, international content, not only local content. And that's why we then have a lot of catching up to do because we're always late. But also the disadvantage of catching on with waves together with the global market is that you become too early for
For
your
your
for your
market.
market.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're ahead of your time, and then by the time the market accepts it, you find that you've got a burnout. You have a burnout. You're exhausted. You're tired because you are trying to educate the market, and also, you did the work of educating the market, and then the bigger player just comes in and closes that space. So it's got its pros and cons. But for someone who doesn't mind contributing to the advancement of society, it doesn't matter. The fact that you contributed to it, becomes sufficient enough. So yeah, beyond reading, I don't think there's any other way beyond reading, beyond networking, beyond looking outside of just the space that you're in. Yeah.
And I'm going to tap a little bit into your predictive side here now.
Yeah.
That with the current wave of AI that we're in,
Yeah.
where is the world and where is Africa right now as we stand?
All right. So as a fellow AI founder, you know that Africa is mostly a consumer for now. We wait for the next announcement to come from the bigger players in the more established markets, and then we try that out, and we share the new applications in our tech forums. We share the new application from this company, from this big tech company. So we mostly at a consumer point. But that's because it's not because we lack talent and ideas, but that's because we're still waiting for the people that actually control the continent, that is the multilateral institutions like the AU, SADC, ECOWAS, to intentionally finance research and development, not just policies. Because I think sometimes policy needs to follow, right? Because we can't pause with our work and wait for them to do policy.
Yeah.
But Africa tends to spend a lot of time on policy. But with other markets, like with the US, we see those guys appearing in front of Congress to answer questions because the policy follows. Policy follows. Yeah, policy needs to come first, and then after policy, then some funding is released. But you find that it's already too late. The market has now adopted foreign, solutions, and they are embedded in their entire processes. So that's the biggest challenge. That's the biggest gap. But what I noticed in the AI wave is that there's much more aggression with the founders, right? They're not waiting for anyone to give them the green light. They're finding ways of driving adoption. They're finding ways of if they're able to build a relationship with someone who's willing to experiment much more faster, they go there. But I guess it's the collective learning from past mistakes, and as a result, I don't think we're gonna be left behind that much, like with other waves. Yeah.
I agree with you on the aggression aspect of it.
Yeah.
African AI founders, I think, are probably the most daring founders right now.
Yeah.
And they're willing to even put different industries together to make a solution work.
Yes.
And I think for me, it also comes down to the incentives of what AI has now brought to us, right? So one, it is literally now possible for my solution to be built today and to serve the world tomorrow.
Yes.
That was part of like a 5-10 year expansion strategy with tech startups before. So you could take your time. I'm not saying founders before weren't aggressive. They were in their own right. But now, again, incentives are different. And like you rightfully said, you can easily partner with someone, not just in your country or continent, but even abroad, who has a passion for the same type of problem and wanting to solve it with AI as an enabler, not just kind of like as the main tool.
Yes.
But I think something else that you mentioned around Africans being the consumer, yes, that's true. But from my perspective, I feel like we're fearful. I feel like we are too fearful to make mistakes. And that's holding us back from building and pioneering, And I think because of that fear, those that are then pioneering and building, it's almost kind of like you're seen in a very weird light until you make it. There's no grace for founders that are really trying to push the boundaries and to build, again, until they make it. And sometimes it's the building journey that you actually need that grace, not once it works and everybody's using it, everyone. I need, a municipality to give me an opportunity to try out my solution with them, not for them to be like, no, only once it works. Because then I'll maybe then go to another country, do it there, it works. And then by the time you need me back, I no longer have capacity for that. So there's a bit of fear there, I think. A fear that is not there in the Western world.
Yeah.
And again, perhaps because for them, they already have the safeguards around technology. I respect that we may not have the necessary safeguards around technology for some of our populations.
Yeah.
And then another important part is what you mentioned, the literacy side of things, that these early founders, these pioneers are having to do that work of educating people. Okay, this is what AI is. This is what it means. Your data is safeguarded with us,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of work that can bring out burnout. But I think a lot of work that then one person can't do it alone. So
Yeah.
it then requires us to maybe all collaborate and say, okay, look, you cover this region of the country or continent, I cover this region. Maybe let's align on how we're doing it. And then we all have a foundation.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be like, okay, because maybe I'm in South Africa, I know all South Africans are comfortable with AI, so I'm just going to plant myself here.
Yeah.
But then someone in the neighboring country, again, that community, that market, then still needs that priming work.
Yeah.
Sorry, there was just so many things that you
no.
brought up in that. Okay, cool. So I want us now to get into the fintech space
Yeah.
that you are in. Because fintech is such an important industry for our continent.
Yes.
We know it's been the one that's been most funded, kind of since investors really started coming into the tech space.
Yeah.
So firstly, I want to understand, where was fintech before AI? Yes, getting a lot of money, a lot of different types of fintech solutions, particularly coming from one region of the continent.
Yeah.
So what was it like then? And then with now AI coming into the mix, how has it opened up or closed up? Or kind of what are the dynamics now?
All right. Okay. So I properly got into fintech in 2015 with Ryovic, and I was at the intersection of insurance, investments, and credit. I pioneered a P2P insurance, especially in this market, which leveraged like a crowd-funded structure for reinsurance. So the crowd-funded structure, there were investors that the model had investors that would back the insurance policies from peers in exchange for premiums. So it was at that intersection. But the challenge with the thinking around fintech in that era was that because finance wasn't really decentralized, running your own investment portfolio, for example, like we see nowadays, wasn't a very common thing. So you were trying, almost everyone was trying to build a financial services product. And what a financial services product does is that it locks you in the market where you can get a license or where you are licensed. And what this era has done, or also because fintech then evolved, right? We started having self-driven portfolios, like or I think self-driven is not the right, but self-managed portfolios where people, I don't want to mention names because I don't want to promote people, but you have like consumers can now manage their own stocks without a broker. Then that allowed for a space for AI, right, to then be a B2C product even across the globe because consumers now need analytical tools to do their own
To manage
risk management. Yeah. So what has happened now is that the geographical barriers have been broken. So you can literally build a fintech solution that that's not a financial service, but that deals with operational things, and it can easily just get adoption in any part of the continent because of the world because people, finance has been decentralized, blockchain and all those things. Finance has been decentralized. So that's the warmth that the market now has. It's just easier to scale. It's easier to build. It's easier to get to find product market fit. Unlike in the previous era where the innovation was mostly about even digitizing this product so that someone can get an insurance policy on an app. It was that era. Moving from paper to apps, payments instead of going to line up from those money remittance guys, and then now you can just claim the money here and go to an ATM. It was that era of just digitizing, but now because things are digitized.
So would you say that first era is more about just making the infrastructure more efficient? So reducing the blockages again to people getting access to their money, getting a financial product, and I guess also just adding a few more products that are specific to the various market or their behavioral needs.
Yeah. So that era was basically digital transformation. It was just a migration to digital, and then once it was done, then everything else became possible. Yeah.
And what would you say was the most innovative? And please do mention a name. But what is the most innovative fintech that kind of you have looked up to, the way that maybe the team built and designed that product and scaled it across the continent, particularly an African one? But if you've got an international one that works very well in Africa,
no, we've got great success stories in the South African ecosystem. Because the problem again with fintech is it limits you. The geography then limits you. Besides on an African scale, obviously you have the telcos with their mobile money and M-Pesa. But those are the cliche now. But in our market, right, we've got companies that have really done well in a very difficult economy where banks can just decide to that you are going to close down tomorrow by providing your service and making it cheaper, like Yoko. We've got companies. It's been inspiring and exciting to watch them emerge. Companies like Pineapple, and also we've had companies that were innovative in the financial product that they provide, like Livestock Wealth, which made investing understandable to African people. Investing in cows and the interest as a calf. We've had great stories in the country, which remain inspiring to some of us, because we saw these companies get in and grow into almost corporates now, right? So we do have stories like that.
No, most definitely.
Yeah.
For me, whenever someone mentions pineapple, I have to just say how much I love pineapple.
Yeah.
I remember when, I think in the early days, I signed up because I'd committed I'm going to support startups because I'm a startup myself. So I signed up, and it was only like a few years later when my phone actually got stolen, and I was like, oh snap, what am I going to do? I was like, oh, I've got pineapple.
Yeah.
I underwent the processes, and literally within like the shortest space of time, I got a new phone because, again, it works.
Yeah.
And I think, sometimes you respect the startups and everything, but they actually do work, which is why they're still here today and they've grown as much as they have. So shout out to Pineapple.
Yeah.
So now let's get into you, FinanceGPT, and the amazing work that you guys are doing over there. So kind of when I learned about FinanceGPT, and this probably late, like much later than when it started, was around the ChatGPT era where everyone was like raving about it. And then FinanceGPT, that's when I learned about FinanceGPT. And I was like, oh, is this like a finance alternative to it? And I think perhaps you've probably encountered many people who have that kind of perception, thinking that it's just the finance version of ChatGPT. But then again, coming to learn more about, I actually realized, no, this is a whole like innovation lab. There's
Yeah.
a lot more that's going on here.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe like explain to us from the beginning, and then we'll take it from
All
there.
right. Okay. No, I'll lay it down with the story. So like I said, I got into tech entrepreneurship in 2014 and the data science space, and fintech until 2019, and then in 2019 I succumbed to burnout, and then I went to work in the venture capital and innovation hub space.
Yeah.
I served in one of the innovation hubs in the SADC region, and I also worked with one of like the most active accelerators in the African continent, across the continent. So I did that for about 3 years of my life, 2019 to 20 end of 2021.
Yeah.
But one thing that frustrated me was that the deployment of venture capital wasn't balanced, right? A lot of the money was going to West and East Africa, and Southern Africa had a challenge. And the more underdeveloped or the more still developing countries in the SADC region, it's really worse for them, right? South Africa gets some of it, but if you go to Lesotho, Swaziland, Namibia, Botswana, Zim, it's the situation is much more harder because there's no data to work with for investing to happen.
Yeah.
So also when it comes to valuations, I realize that there's a big challenge, but it's because of the data gap, right? When I left VC, I decided that I want to solve that problem. I want to make it possible to use data from like other formal markets, like from the US, from Nigeria, because I think they have much more data around transactions and investments from Asia and Europe, and then build a model that can, in a way, generate synthetic data that can help us have comps in SADC, that can help us do valuations in under the circumstances that we face, so that investors coming from outside these markets can have something that they can work with to fund startups. So that is how then I got to build this, and then the generative aspect was there because it had to generate synthetic data based on different parameters. So because people like it was the GPT era, right? It made more sense because now AI towards the end of 2022 becomes mainstream. And instead of having .ai at the end of your name, to drive adoption much more quicker and test product market fit, it makes sense to have a GPT at the end.
That is smart.
Yeah, so that is how that then happens. But the core of what we are building isn't really LLM, because LLM is it's language, right? And we are dealing with uh, you know a data problem. We're dealing with numbers. We're dealing with quants. So we had to invest more in a quantitative approach, a generative AI still approach, but that is more quantitative, and that's where our work is. That's where our R&D is. But it still works with LLMs, because you sometimes need to speak to what you have. You need to prompt it, and that needs natural language processing. So yeah, essentially that is what this is about.
So we can say the Gen AI aspect is just for your interface, really, for people to engage with it and again prompt it and get any type of answer they want. But really, most of the work that you're doing is research and development on ensuring that data is accessible, and you have the right amount of data for the different markets that you focus on.
Oh no, large quantitative models are generative. It's just that they generate data, but not just with some things when you say generated data set for me that I can use maybe to plot a graph. It will just generate random numbers. This is not. It doesn't generate random a synthetic data set.
So walk me through this.
Yeah.
I want a data set.
Yeah.
Have nowhere to start. I come to you or to your platform, and then I say, give me a data set on, I don't know, price of petrol over the past 10 years in this region.
Yeah.
It can then generate a synthetic data set, which is true because it's based on data you had already fed it.
No. So that is what LLM will do for you. So what we do is let me use the stock market as an example because that's our core use case. It's we're currently just focusing on stock price prediction so that we can automate the construction of investment portfolios that can outperform the other traditional methods. So with South Africa, for example, if you dealing with predicting the price of a stock of a period of over a period of time, the challenge is that one of the challenges that you face if maybe you have a strategy that also uses options chain data is that you won't have that, but if you doing the S&P 500 in the US, you have a better performing model because you can incorporate that feature and have predictions that are also based on actual sentiment of options contracts. So in a South African context, the model will then, as it's doing the analysis or the prediction, will generate that synthetic data set based on what is in the news, right? Like what it has from the news, convert some of it into numerical data, but then also where there are gaps, then fill in using the VAE gen model. But I feel like we are now going too deep. Using the VAE gen model, right? Generate a synthetic data set that will complement the historical, normal historical price changes on a daily basis to then, improve the focus of that model under those circumstances. Yeah.
Okay, so it's a combination of like sentiment analysis, generative AI. I think what I'm trying.
No, it's not.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying. I think I'm trying to wrap my head around which fields intersect to then provide this unique insight.
It's just generative AI. So, a variational autoencoder basically compresses like whichever data set you have. It's just that I feel now we are getting into scientific.
Can you just answer this one question and then I'll let it go?
So a variational autoencoder is a machine learning algorithm or system that compresses data. So the sentiment analysis it's just meant to give the JN enough noise for it to then generate the synthetic data set. So it's what you would be doing in prompting in a normal LLM scenario. But the prompt isn't you saying, do this for me. The prompt is the historical data that the model can get access to. And then there's articles that are underlying, but just converted. It's not a core of the model, just converted into numericals. So they just give the noise that it would then need to generate that data set that will pretend as if there was an options chain contract that happened on this day. And this is what the market was pricing it at. And then this was the volatility of implied volatility based on those contracts. And so that is what it does. Prompting happens, but the prompting is done is in the background. Yeah.
So the main use case then does become investments, stocks.
Yeah.
Or
That's a start. That's a start. Where it's time series, then a large quantitative model works, but we need to work on a use case, perfect the use case.
And
but
then-
even with weather, right, it's something that can be applicable in a weather for farmers, a weather use case. Even in finance, it can extend to other things.
And some
Looking
macroeconomic
at
variables, things
yeah,
like that.
forecasting revenue, forecasting, but we just need to start with one use case, nail it. So we're using it now for generating portfolio. That's what we've been doing for the year, for the past year, and
Yes.
comparing with the other traditional models or methods of finance in construction and constructing those portfolios.
Sure.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. I've literally just learned something completely new today.
Yeah.
My background is in finance, so
Yeah.
I am extremely intrigued by this and
Yeah.
kind of then how it fares out with some of the other theories and models that, banks use,
Yeah.
to do this. So yeah, offline. I'll get you offline.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk.
But I think, then kind of maybe coming back to building as an AI founder, you just mentioned now that, finding your use case, really perfecting, that space and knowing what goes wrong or, where, or also how to price and commercialize it before you move on to something else.
Yeah.
How easy has it been for you to do that in this market? Have you found that it might actually be easier for you to prove the validity of your use case somewhere else? And how has that looked like for FinanceGPT?
Okay. Yeah, it's been very because I have experience. Because I'm sitting on 11 years of tech experience. I already know how difficult the market I exist in is for initial adoption and finding product market fit. So immediately from day one, I was already incorporated in the UK.
And these are
Within-
lessons from the past.
Yeah,
where-
lessons from the past. Yeah. I was already working on incorporating in the US, and then immediately the product was done. We focused more on marketing in those markets because people are willing to experiment, right? If they don't like it, they'll just drop off. It's fine, but they'll try it out, test it out, give you feedback also because they do give feedback, even if
Yes.
it's a complaint or a suggestion. But we also made it available for free at the beginning so that the feedback is not a complaint. It's not out of anger, but it's to say, oh, if you could do this. So we crowdsourced a lot of the R&D because we're just starting. So it's important with AI to just be global from day one. And I'm not talking about actual operations. You can still operate in the same place. But because, your customers can reach you over email, they can reach you over phone. And I believe even with language, right? Companies that are outside the continent trying to bring things in here are actually your main customers than the ones that are here.
Our first client was from Asia.
Yes, that's how it is. And then just then penetrating the local market with external validation. It then becomes much more easier. It becomes quicker to find product market fit.
Definitely.
So yeah, that was the approach on my side, and I think it worked. I think it worked. If you paid attention, 2023, I was everywhere. There's no corner of the world that I did not reach, because I understood that to be able to be visible at a global level, you need to do that very, very early before the market matures, because you'll be overtaken by events, and then no one will care about what you're doing. And then also what we did is that we created different interfaces, right? We've got our core product is like the underlying models, but because a lot of people just want to chat, right? They want to chat with something. Then we had to like mix LLM with the large quantitative model, so that there's a chat interface that if it's a calculation or someone wants to generate a chart, a graph, then they're able to utilize that to have that function. And then for those that just want tools, that just want to run an analysis on their documents, created an interface. We created different interfaces for people to play around with what we are building. And that worked for us because we're able to now attract, or build up a user base over people that have different use cases, but that are still very much aligned to the same core use case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's interesting. And I'd like to ask then, from you engaging with then the global community,
Yeah.
what are AI exits looking like right now? And for a founder who perhaps has investors or is even thinking for themselves, look, yes, I'm building this, but this is really fast. I may not have the resources to continue building at this scale, and I should start exploring that option. Again, what does that look like? How does one get started with exit strategizing?
So I think the prospects are quite high, and that's not just being trying. That's not just me trying to be hopeful. So in 2023, we already had like someone in the UK who wanted to launch in the compliance, audit and compliance space, wanted to take it, wanted to take FinanceGPT, but we're just about 5 months in the market. There was still a lot of work to be done, and I felt it was too early. But even now, I know there's a lot of much more bigger companies that wanted to play around in the space, like banks, big banks in the US, some of the data providers. They ended up only with releasing a paper and making a big announcement, but their product never really, got to the market. So I know that I'm building an acquisition target for those institutions.
Yeah.
And I think the prospects are high, but it's just important to invest in building, right? Don't be like only an API integrator. You're just pulling open AI, and then you say you've built AI. Build something. Build a data set. If at least have a proprietary data set, or have an architecture. Have something that can be acquired. But I think the opportunities are there, and the strategy is obviously having those relationships now. If there's an accelerator program, for example, even if it doesn't pay, that a big bank for me runs, I can join that because I know that I want to get closer to these people. And also, even if they're not the ones that do the acquisition, but then their peers will see that, oh, okay, those guys were incubated or accelerated by this big bank, then maybe there's something we can talk about. So, yeah,
It definitely adds to credibility as well, right?
Yeah, it
Having
does.
the different affiliations. And
Yes.
I think, yeah, we especially in this AI era, because again, so many solutions, things are happening so fast.
Yes.
I think the only thing that is still happening at a normal pace is relationship building, and we
Yes.
should still be investing in that.
Yeah.
And most likely, even once FinanceGPT gets acquired, if that's your desire, that's
Yeah.
not going to be your last startup, right?
No.
Exactly. You're going to be building more. So it's those
Yeah.
relationships that you'll leverage for funding, for access to markets, for access to
Yes.
networks. And yeah, I think it's something that we've also just had to learn that, look, you're building something and it is consuming. You want to just be like sitting by a computer, going at it, but don't forget the people aspect of it. Don't forget the relationship side, because
Yeah.
when you're building, they're the ones who are at conferences speaking, oh, I know Vambo AI, they're doing this. And they're the ones who
Yeah.
are kind of, sharing the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, brilliant. So, Piwa, before we close off, two questions that I kind of usually try to ask. Where do you see African AI within the next 5 to 10 years?
I think I agree with Sam Altman that I think he said something about Africa being
So that
uh,
the
that
next
Africa
frontier.
will be the next frontier of AI.
Mm.
So I believe that, and that's because I've seen like I said, the aggression by founders in the
Yes.
absence of people aren't even writing about us that much, right? But or the work that we're doing, but there's this
The
drive
hunger
and
is
to make
different.
things happen,
Mm.
make things work. So I think we'll be a very dominant force, and also with the with the networking that we're doing, right? I I see like a proper alliance being formed around the startups that can then allow us, or the AI labs and companies that can allow us to really challenge the status quo and compete with the bigger guys that are in Europe and America. So yeah, that's what I see. We really contributing to the foundations, right? And that is what really matters,
Yeah.
and that is what cements how a people or a continent will be in the future of that. The story of that specific innovation must include us, and I know that it will now, because we've done things that had to be done, at least to have something in the chapters of
Yes.
generative AI, because AI broadly is too big. But in generative AI, yes, um, you know, yeah, I think we've done things, we've made the right moves.
I think we have.
Yeah,
I think those that have really taken the bull by the horns and decided to, again, pivot if you need to pivot,
yeah,
or upskill if you have to upskill. But those that are building,
yeah,
they, I think our societies will recognize it obviously later,
yeah,
but they have really moved the needle and at least kept us in the race.
yeah,
Um, we're not going to be catching up too much. I
yeah,
don't think so. And we'll have, again, the next 10, 20 years, we'll have experts that are on par with those in the global community. So
yeah,
totally agree with those sentiments.
yeah.
And then my last question, do you have any parting shots for our viewers? And you can choose to address anyone, whether it's a founder, a young person, an expert right now. Any parting shots from you?
All right, okay, and I believe I have to look here. So I'd like to just encourage young founders, African founders, to just continue trying, fighting. I think I still believe we are still first generation, even though the some people that have come before us, but we all still first generation in innovation, and we need to try as much as we can to revive the legacy of our forefathers who came up with a lot of these things, the great Egyptians of old, the innovators of the South. Mining, for example, started in Southern Africa, right, with Ngwenya mine. That's the oldest mine in the world. Mathematics was also like is an African innovation. So we just need to revive that legacy and bring back that African spirit, but also with multilateral institutions like the AU, SADC, ECOWAS. Please just support us, back us. This is not for us; it's for the continent. It's for Africa. So we need as much support as we can get, so that we can continue and make sure that we finish this race. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
that is what our podcast is about,
Yeah.
bringing passionate Africans who really care about this continent beyond their respective countries and regions and just want us to win. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, Pure, for joining us today.
Thank you
And
for
thank you, everyone, for joining and tuning into today's episode of the Vambo AI in Africa podcast. I'm Chido, co-founder and CEO of Vambo AI. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this video. I will share Pio's details in the comment section for you to follow him and the amazing work that he's doing. But again, catch us next time for the next episode of Vambo AI in Africa. Thank you. Bye.